Good morning, Mike. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, Steve. I'm well.
Well,
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. This seems a little choppy this morning. You know what I mean? Our executive producer, he gives us a hard time each morning about us not doing certain things, and then we get hit with this.
That's okay.
You
Alex, the
know,
man. He's doing
he
all
is the
right.
man. Don't get me wrong. He's brilliant. But we did learn though that he has literally just got out of bed. He's in the West Coast, so it's 5
West
a.m. So
Coast time. Crazy.
we'll let him off. We'll let him off. So how you doing, man? You feeling good?
Yeah, I had a rough night's sleep last night. Little indigestion. I kind of ate too much last night. I think I mentioned to you, IFMA happy hour, virtual
Oh
happy
yeah,
hour.
yeah, yeah.
And I felt like I needed to pretend like it was a real happy hour. So I had, a little glass of wine and then a little snacks. And then my wife and I decided to order out, support local
Mm,
restaurants. And that went really well. There's one of our favorite places, little Italian sandwich shop, and we ordered enough for not just last night, but for the weekend. So I overindulged a little last night, Steve. So it got caught up with me, but I'm doing better now. So how about you?
good, good, good. No, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I think this is the time where I think you're not alone in overindulging. I've actually tried to limit when I eat before I go to bed, and just so that I don't feel that feeling that you had last night and it affects your sleeping. But
Yeah.
just going through the news this morning, I don't know what your sort of thoughts are, what you've seen. 6.6 million people unemployed, man. That's crazy numbers, right? Crazy.
It is. And I've been listening to Freakonomics Radio, another podcast that I
Yeah.
love. Um, those guys are trying to break down with all the economists, did the package that we put together, or the government put together last week, is it going to be enough to freeze small businesses in time? Because that was the idea. They knew this was coming. The unemployment filings would come through, and the idea was to have enough unemployment benefits ready to go to keep those folks whole for a period of time, and to help small businesses just kind of freeze where they were until they can get through this and hopefully come out of the other end. But it doesn't seem to me. I mean, again, I hope we can save many small businesses, and I know that there are, people trying to work those numbers out. But this just the red tape and getting the money to the people to say don't lay off your workers, and we'll keep you whole. It's obviously not working, because there's a lot of people that are now uh, filing for unemployment. Those numbers are just, I can't even fathom those numbers that you just talked about, and I imagine it's difficult for anyone to. But yeah, hopeful that we can get through this, and once we get to a period of return to some kind of economic normalcy, there'll be a big recovery quickly. And that's where I spend most of my time, Steve, is looking at the data around not just workplace, but that's a conversation that was had last night. We could talk about a little bit more with my IFMA friends. The facility management community
Hmm.
had questions about, when do we get back to the office? When will employees come back to the buildings? What was they did a couple poll questions I'll share with you uh, about that. When do you feel people will come back to the buildings in mass? When are you going to be comfortable as an individual going back to a public setting, for example, like a local chapter event of some kind, a public gathering of some kind? So I'd be
Mm.
curious to know, what would you have answered? Those are the two poll questions, and we're trying to get this economy moving again. Once we get over the hump of the curve, we're trying to get, flatten the curve, and then come on the downside of that curve in the coming weeks and months. But I mean, the poll question said, when do you feel that people will be coming back to your office in mass? And as a corporate real estate leader, have you even begun to think, is it June, July, August, or later? Those are the options. May is not on the table. We're already locked down through April. In Virginia, the governor said June 10th is when the social distancing rules would be reevaluated. So June, July, August, or later. How would you have answered that as far as employees coming back to the offices in mass? Now, obviously, there'll be a
Mm.
trickling in, I'm sure.
I would have answered later. That would be my guesstimate. I think as a society, as a population, I think people have to have comfort. Business leaders, governors, state authorities, mayors have to have complete confidence that everyone will be well. I think for this to happen, you have to have people be able to be tested to see that they have the antibodies so they can feel comfortable engaging with other society, with society as a whole. I think, vaccines have to be there. Whether or not you choose to take them, obviously we can debate that another time, but in essence, you have to provide comfort to individuals so that you feel, okay, it is safe to leave my home, it is safe to interact, because no matter what it's like, we're going to go back and we're going to see people we haven't seen for a long time. And it's going to be instantly, you want to go up, shake people's hand, give people hugs, whatever it is, because you just haven't seen each other in such a long time, And I think
Mm.
everyone has to feel comfort. You think
Will
about
we?
getting on
Will we shake hands
I
again?
don't know. I don't know. I
I
don't
think there's
know.
going to be a new
It's
culture shift.
maybe, maybe,
Hello.
maybe, maybe,
Or
and
maybe the
it's
I saw the Wakanda, Black Panther,
mm,
greeting as far as a way to greet someone with respect
yeah,
without touching.
yeah, no,
Do it
no,
in
it's
other
it's
cultures. I mean,
yeah,
Asian
yeah.
cultures are that way.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think we're so used to shaking people's hands. We're so used to giving people hugs. We're just so used to it. Europeans, they kiss each other on the cheeks all the time. How do
Yep.
they adjust to that?
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Can we
I
really
do
get
think
to
it's
a
going to be
point
later.
though? I think your instinct is correct, but do you think, and maybe it's too early to talk about this again, not being insensitive, we are even,
Hmm.
we're still a week or two away from what all the experts say to the peak of this, and the fog of war is what it is. They keep referring it that way, where you can't even make sense, especially in hotspots like New York, what's going on, let alone, where we'll be a month or 2 months from now. But I mean, I am, again, this is my constant drumbeat message, is I hope the leadership of our country, of our corporations, are casting a vision of, listen, we've never been 100% able to guarantee your health and safety in any scenario.
Mm,
You can't. I mean, we can't get the risks to be zero. So how do you prepare people mentally to come back to an environment where, yes, we've done the cleaning, the disinfecting, we have protocols in place for people to create an environment in which we feel you are as safe as we can make you, but at the same time not be afraid to wait for that vaccine, because I think the vaccine is at least 2021, early 2021, the best, most optimistic guesses. And even then, not everybody's going to have a vaccine. So again, you mentioned testing. I am so excited to see what the innovators do in the health community around antibody testing, and rolling that out, really rapidly rolling that out, so everybody can take a test. Everybody knows where they stand. Have you had it? Have you not had it? And then even those quick tests to say, at the moment, do you, if you've not had it, are you clear to come to this place, a public setting? And I don't know if we get to that point. I think that's the strategy it's got to be, if we're gonna reopen society. But this bill, and I know, $2 trillion is a lot of money, but it's not, all of it's not designed to replace all these lost workers and jobs. So people need to start pivoting. We've talked about this in the world of FM for a long time, is that the profession is evolving as technology and automation and AI has taken over a lot of manual functions that were formerly human jobs. We have to be more strategic, and we have to pivot. We have to upskill. We have to learn new things, and take advantage of our human capabilities that machines can't replace. So this is just an accelerant on the broader society. So those folks who lost their jobs in retail may have to go to an e-commerce company, or a company, or a company that's developing new channels for delivery of groceries, as opposed to a grocery store. I don't know what it is. I'm just
yeah.
throwing things out there.
Yeah, no, and the other way you look at it, see, we go through the situation we're going through, all the products that everyone's trying to procure around the world is coming from China. Right? So will countries take responsibility going forward that actually all this material, ventilators, the PPP equipment, everything is created, distributed, manufactured, all within its own borders to ensure going forward that this we are protected. So I mean, that's you think about the creation of jobs that could potentially do as well. So
Do you think
I'm
there's a
sure
pulling back of globalism? There's a pulling back
maybe,
of
maybe.
that global economy.
Well, I mean, you look, I mean, you just take the simple price of a ventilator, right? It apparently will 25, you hear every day it was 50 yesterday, it's now 60 today, or there is no more ventilators to buy, right? Because there only is X amount of production and an X amount of time it takes to create a ventilator.
Yep.
So how do governments, countries, society, hospitals, how do you protect yourself against this? And then also, obviously, like every incident has its own thing or own choke point where you don't know what actually is going to be that item of necessity. But how do you then ensure, as you know, a country the size of the U.S. with the economic and buying power that the U.S. has, that how do we then create whatever it is we want to do and have it within our own borders. And that goes across, I have to imagine, Italy, Spain, the UK, all through Europe, Australia, everyone around the world will be thinking exactly the same thing. We can't be reliant on one country to provide this when everyone needs it at the same time.
Are you reading a lot about that being done? I know I read Tesla and GM and others are making ventilators now, and uh, other companies are converting their manufacturing to make masks and things like that, and everybody's ramping up production. But that was the idea, right? We were supposed to stay home, flatten the curve, give them time to
Hmm.
create the equipment we need to manage this crisis. Are you reading a lot about that piece? Are we building enough hospital beds? Are we building enough ventilators? Are you reading anything about that, or is it just? I
So,
mean,
I
that's
mean,
that's that's where we need better information as people.
yeah, no, and to be fair, I think there's a lot of information out there. It's the challenges are is the timing on whenever you hear that information. Things just change and move so fast at the moment that you could listen to something one day that's one day that's been since published and it's out of date, right? So how do you keep yourself informed and updated? And as we both try and give ourselves that little bit of window in the morning just to catch up, just to read whatever it is, the current status, so to speak. But it's a shifting goalpost. It's just or a shifting goal
Yeah,
line.
and those
It's just
models, I did find a model I'll share with you. I meant to that does layer in the current state of hospital beds and ICU
hmm
units, as well as most of the models that we've seen so far are all about the anticipated growth of the case count and then the growth of the death count. But I'd like to, this model was kind of also bringing in the current state of the healthcare system, which was interesting
yeah,
to me because that shifts state to state, not just globally, not just country.
yeah,
So those are things that are interesting to see. If we flatten the curve, are we actually then going to stay under our current capacity? And the predictions were that in Virginia anyway. So I live in Virginia, DC area,
hmm
that we would that this action that we did based on their models, it'll slow it enough that we stay under our capacity, which is good news. So there's good news out there. But back to my
The
question before I
challenge.
forget.
Sorry, I just
Final
go
call.
no
Yeah.
go no 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 go ahead, go ahead. I don't want you to miss something that you
I'll come
forget.
back to my IFMA question to
Okay,
you about
okay,
getting back into public. But do you have a thought about that model? Is that something
yeah.
you'd be interested
So
in
I
seeing?
mean, yeah, no, and it's we'll never know the truth, but there is a lot of information coming out that actually the way the baseline for those models and how the models were created were based on information they received from China. So that's the foundation, right, of every hypothesis that is then run from the model going forward. Now there's a lot of, me and my conspiracy theories and how I like to sort of listen and watch these things. There's a lot of people out there saying actually the original information may not have been so accurate. So perhaps the disclaimers of people of a certain age, so younger people wouldn't actually get anything, there would be no impact to them. And we're hearing more and more about younger people actually being more exposed and suffering. So I just wonder, I suspect the European community and the North American community and other countries around the world will actually pull resources and pull stuff together. So I think the models may become more accurate as time goes past.
I would
And
hope.
and then whenever you think about where AI comes into it, they actually need so much content, billion points of data to actually be able to run their algorithms efficiently. And obviously, with more time, those algorithms become more accurate. But I think, but going back to sort of my original thought and sort of where do you sit on that? I don't know if you've watched anything. If you have any thoughts about, maybe that information that we initially received from China may not have been 100% accurate.
Oh, I personally, I think that Of course not. I don't believe anything the
Yeah,
Chinese government
yeah,
is telling us, and I don't
yeah,
believe the current state over there is accurate. But
yeah,
I think we've seen it sweep through Western societies where there is more transparency, or then the media digs things up. I certainly know our media is highlighting all those, albeit I think still rare cases of young people, healthy people dying. I think I mentioned this earlier in one of this, in either this conversation or others, is that, you know, the statistical information that the doctors have, Dr. Fauci and those folks who I do trust, is that the vast majority of folks who do succumb are those with underlying conditions that are older, but there are some strange twists that come where we don't know why a young person in their 20s or 30s or even 40s or 50s are seemingly apparently very healthy, yet they succumb to the disease. So again, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one here on the internet, but I think those stories are nice for the media to highlight, because it
mm,
does get us all riled up, and it
yeah,
brings fear. And just like any time in normal circumstances, you hear the story of the tragic young person who died suddenly, um, without any apparent reason. It's horrible, because those
yeah,
are the things that we greatly fear. We always hear a story of a tragic loss or death or illness, and your brain wants to rationalize it. Your brain wants to say, oh well, that they must have had some other problem, or this is why, that they were a smoker, or they had some, whatever it is. We try to fill in those blanks to make ourselves feel better. We tell stories, we try to make ourselves feel better. So that's all just human nature. And that's what I think opens us up, and we can have a conversation about your
yeah.
susceptibility to conspiracy theories, because we can't control all things. We don't know all things. We'll never know all things. So we're prone to want to fill in those blanks with something that seems to make sense. And some people, based on anecdotal evidence or information, create a story that appeals to us as humans. But again, that is another podcast for another day.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
how about you personally? Are you going to go back into a public setting before? So you said after August for employees to come back to the workplace. What about gatherings in public? You think there'll be a similar timeline, or do you think it'll be June, July, August, when you feel comfortable going back into the world?
I mean, so I think rather than putting a date on it, so I sort of look at it. When would I feel comfortable, right? So what would be the factors? What would be the environment it would need to be for me to feel comfortable going into the office, feeling safe, and so on and so forth. I think for me, I would have to have the test to ensure I have the antibodies for me to feel comfortable. That's what it'll require for me. We've spoke about offline. I have underlying health issues, so I'm extra cautious. I do all I
Mhm.
can to maintain my health, and I try to eat the right things, and that's why sleep is so important to me. But that's what it would need for me to interact with society, and unfortunately, thankfully, through the video, the media, through Zoom, et cetera, FaceTime, it's really easy to stay connected. Of
Yeah,
course, it's not the same. Let's not say it's not the same, but there are so many good things that have come out of this. I mean, I
yeah,
don't know if I've seen my colleagues as much as I
yeah. Isn't
have
that ironic?
over this time, people who are on the other side of the world who I've never met before. Now, because everyone's on video, you get to see people, right? You get to see people at home, you get to see people in their best and worst cases, and it's
It's
really really
great.
good, So
Yeah,
it's the question we also have to ask ourselves. So whenever we go back to the environment, right, and the lights go back on, what are the things that we have learned that are really good? What are the things that are better right now? And how do we ensure we maintain those things whenever we go back to the office? What are the things that don't work? What are the things that we need to improve whenever we go back to the office? What are those things? And how do we ensure that we actually select the right environment to go back to, right? So, from an organizational perspective, right, what are the lessons learned? How are we setting ourselves up today because of the things we're learning to ensure that going forward, if these things happen again, we are set up and we are able to, we are agile in the sense of whether we're in the office or whether we're home, we are as productive. You and I are fortunate, right? So you work from home. I have a home office where I'm home Monday to Friday. I have colleagues who don't, right? They've made purchasing decisions on the fact that they're going to work in an office, and
Mhm.
therefore they're renting apartments, they're buying apartments, whatever it is in the city. If they know that they're going to be in this situation, would they have made different decisions, right?
Yeah.
From a personal perspective, how do we protect society, our companies, our employees? How do we protect each other from those things, right?
Mm. So much to
You
unpack
know,
there, Steve. In fact,
I
I don't
know,
want to
I know.
forget this because I was worried yesterday about the Zoom happy hour, the virtual
Mm.
happy hour. And I said, how do they do this? We're going to have like 30, 40 people on Zoom all at the same time. How do you interact? How do you have even a conversation? Well, it was so great. I didn't even know this existed, that they had the big group all together for a little while. We did a little preview. Some people were chiming in, as you said, the loudest voices. But then they said, we're going to break into these little breakout sessions. Have you done this yet on Zoom where they have
So
little a
I
breakout,
joined one
5,
yesterday.
yeah, 4 or 5 people at a time, and we
Yeah,
were on
I
this
joined
little
one yesterday, and I
huh,
had to jump. It's like, I did my best. I felt good. I got onto a webinar. Finally, I've had the time to get onto a webinar, but then my phone starts going, so I have to jump. So
oh,
it broke in. It was the same concept, but it's a brilliant concept.
it is, and it was very cool because it was like being at a little smaller group within a party setting. So I think
Yeah.
they set it up for 5 or 10 minutes of breakout sessions, and we did 3 times in the hour. We would go back to the big group, share a couple stories or of what went on in the breakouts, and we go to these smaller groups. We had a chance to really just 4 or 5 people on the screen at once, interact. That's plenty small enough to have a natural conversation. There was a moderator, someone who was in charge of kind of making sure we kept things moving. But I thought it was brilliant, and that was a feature of Zoom I didn't even know existed. Now, to answer your
Mm.
question about getting back to work and some of the organizational changes, that fascinates me too. And I'm reading as many articles as I can, uh, you know, and I'll be interested to see what the research shows around how people were more effective working from home than expected. Some of my FM and workplace friends are actually kind of optimistic because their organizations culturally were not accepting of work from home, or were resistant to the idea
Mhm.
of trusting employees to do their work remotely in any capacity. So they resisted those changes. Now they were forced into it, and if the data shows that they could be as productive in this environment of the pandemic, that when we get back to a normal condition, they'll rethink some of those policies. So I know that's what a lot of the HOK articles are about, and there's some new ones
Mhm.
that are coming out each day. And I've read I haven't read it yet. I can't read it all as you can't, but there's stuff that I'm going to be looking for to talk about. I'm going to start talking to people, figuring this out. As far as using the podcast, as a platform to discuss these things and ask experts what they are seeing as the data comes in and what they're
Yeah.
expecting as we get back to work, because I think that's where we can be most helpful to this community of facility management real estate leaders. I sat on a great webinar from CBRE yesterday,
Mm.
that discussed leases in the context of space, and the what again, early stage, but they were breaking down the stages of post pandemic. And I screenshotted a couple of the graphs that I need to go back and analyze. But it was interesting to see that they're thinking through this, as a and you must be, as a real estate leader, you know managing your real estate has always been something that you've had to look at a lot of data to decide, what space do we need, what's the most optimized use of that space. So I'm interested to see a lot of those really smart people that tell us, how best to reconfigure the workplace going forward. Will we need more space, more social distancing within the work environment? Things like that is going to be very
Yeah.
interesting to see. And there's some real practical strategies that'll come from this, I'm sure.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. And, I've been reaching out to a lot of people and friends of the show, friends who I know have been on your show, your podcast, basically asking the same type of questions. So what things are they doing? And I had a great conversation with my good friend, Luke Camperman. I don't know if you know Luke,
I don't
great
know.
guy.
No.
Fantastic, fantastic, very, very bright. And his whole company, and I would Vloderhoin is their company, they're a Dutch company.
Okay.
And that's my enunciation of it, so it may not be pronounced that way, but look, Campbell with a K, great guy. I had a chance with him yesterday, and I was, like, asking these questions. So how do we think about going back to the workplace? What are the things that we need to be looking at? And I remember when we did the interview initially, for the show, he started with, "It all begins with corporate strategy." right? What is your corporate strategy? That then leads into your workforce strategy, that leads into your workplace strategy, so your real estate strategy. So how is this changing your corporate strategy, and how is that then going to change into your workforce strategy, which then translates into the real estate strategy?
Hmm.
Where what I'm concerned about is we make these real estate decisions without understanding the changes and the cultural changes that will happen with the corporation and corporate strategies. So he, took me back and reminded me of a lot of those different things. Um, Always go back to what is your culture of the organization? What culture do your leadership want post pandemic? How do you then create that? And what is the workforce plan thereafter? And then and then on the back of all that information, then you make your real estate decision. So it's really interesting. And, please share the CBRE information. I'd love to take a look and see where their mindsets are. And that's the great thing at the moment. We're getting so many different opinions.
Yeah,
No one's right, no one's wrong, but it's like, as individuals, we have to absorb this information. We have to think about it, ponder it, talk about it, individuals within the organization, and sort of say, okay, how does this impact our organization? Because every organization is different. Every organization performs different tasks. Every location performs different tasks and it's different responsibilities. So you have to apply it business by business, location by location, and you have to be able to then be able to be that agile, that flexibility that we all talk about that's required.
absolutely.
Yeah,
And we need to remember the human beings. Again, a lot of the more you
sure.
talk and I'm listening and I'm reflecting on my, really literally years of interviews with people, it's this idea of culture and holistic view of workplace decisions and making the right choices to meet the needs of the occupants of our facilities, right? That's what it's all
Hmm.
about. That's not going to change. It's going to be some different parameters, some different variables to take into consideration, but that's always been the case. There's always been
Mm,
new threats of natural disasters, emergency preparedness around that, whether it's wildfires out on the West Coast or, you know, terrorist threats and other type of things that our facility management community has had to deal with. Add that this layer of this health has always been, flu season. I talked to many
mm,
people, flu season has always been a time for special, deep cleaning, disinfecting, what have you. We just need to, get the new information about what this current virus does and act accordingly once we have the
yeah,
science
yeah,
behind it, the data behind it. So
yeah.
we want to inspire people
Before,
that there are
before,
answers to
before,
come.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, and I know you're gonna go into your motivational quote, but I just
I
wanna
have
sort of
to. I
touch.
have to
I no,
motivate
no, no, no,
people
no, and I don't wanna,
before the
and
weekend.
I apologize for interrupting you on this, but I just released an interview I did yesterday with my good friend John Schultz, and there's 2 words he said that it's gonna signify everything that we're going through, and you take the conversation we just had on data, communication, organization, changing cultures, and so on and so forth, and the two he had was trust and transparency. So how are we as society? How are we as organizations? How are we as employees? How are we as just relationships as well? Trust and transparency. How do we move forward with those things?
All good questions.
Yeah.
And we're here to help. We're here to help each other. Workplaceinnovator.com is my home of podcasts that are evergreen. They're out there. A lot of these principles are available. Open source workplace available, resources, interviews, white papers, so many things that in this time of preparing for what the what ifs and what the future looks like, all those things that you didn't have a chance to read or listen to. I think we're to past the point of that shock of the first couple of weeks. We're past the point of the grieving. We talked about grieving and getting past, this idea that, wow, this is not going to be normal again for a long time. It's going to be a new normal, and we have to be prepared for that. What are we going to do about, as Seth Godin said, what are we going to do now that we know this
Mm,
is the new situation? Well, I'm, not to minimize the suffering going on in each person's lives, individually, personally, family wise, community wise, but there are, all of us are in this together. And I love that on the weekly Workplace Innovator interactive live stream we do, that my co-host Madison always shares a quote at the beginning to get us going. And I haven't had a chance to share these with you, but the last couple of weeks she said, life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it. That was one that she shared a couple of weeks ago. And isn't that true? Whether it's the
mhm.
situation of dealing with this news and then panicking, going out and buy toilet paper, or deciding, hey, I'm gonna, you know, make a decision in this emotion to think of others first and sacrifice. I think many of us, have gotten through that initial anxiety and have and deferred to helping others. And then this past Wednesday, she said this one, which is unattributed again. Whenever you feel weak, remember the things that made you strong. Whenever you start to doubt yourself, remember those who believe in you. And Steve, it's family, it's friends, it's our workplace community, and it's guys like you who get me through each day. So I think that's a great way to end for the week. And as we head into the weekend, remember those personal connections. Take time to reach out to a family member or a friend who you haven't talked to. Have a virtual happy hour and stay connected. And I think that all of us will be better off for it.
For sure, man. Have a great one. Speak to you
You
soon,
too.
man. Thank you.
See
Cheers.
ya.